Hi there guys, this is Chaos back again. This is part 3 of my tutorial. If you haven't seen the first 2 parts, I recommend that if you're a novice player, do check them out in order in 1 and 2. If you guys found your way here because you guys are already familiar with the game, know how to gear yourself up, but you want to basically find out how to progress better with the Bulldozer Barb, well, this is the video for you. You can skip the first 2 if you know how to gear and you know what the build is about. In this video, I've chosen to be in Act 3 in Hell. And the reason for it is because I'm going to run this way. I'm going to run without a weapon. I'm going to go out there and try to stir up some trouble, find some mobs, and I'm going to show you some synergies and techniques that you use with this build. A lot of people on Reddit had came up to me after watching my videos and try to get some pointers on how to do some things or how to stay alive, playing the way that I play. And I think a lot of the people also have trouble with Whirlwind Barb the same way, where they see the meat part of the actual build and they consistently try to focus all their energy into doing that while ignoring all survivability. Well, my build is a little different. My build is focused around tankability along with a very easy way to kill large groups of enemies. Also, it works great for blue mobs because there's usually 3 or 4 of them and you could charge them and kill them all at the same time. But it doesn't mean that you should just play purely with the charge button, so you don't right click everything. And this video once again is going to show you some techniques that I use to fight some things. So I'm going to go out there and find a mob, and I'm in Hell right now because I could stand there all day, take damage, and not have to worry. I switched out my primary rings and amulets for my blue stuff, and it's going to give me 934 life on hit even without a weapon, so I can go ahead and dance around them and everything like that and it will not kill me. So I'm going to cut off here, I'm going to find a mob, pause it, and then go ahead and bring it up and show you guys some skills or some synergies between the skills that you could go ahead and use for your own progression. Alrighty guys, I'm back. So I got a few melee guys here that's going to make my job a lot easier to show you this build right now. But before I go into the action portion of it, I just want to cover some ground rules. The build is going to require you to do a couple things. I know as many of my videos as I've shown prior to the few threads that I posted, some people still haven't gotten the basics of how this works. So remember, if you haven't watched the other 2 videos, when you charge into a certain mob, you sprint along with it. So what that means is you push both buttons, make sure sprint within this 3 seconds, you're charging within the time sprint's active. And what that does is it allows you to hit with sprint or hits with charge and then sprint with lay tornadoes, in the wake of where you're going. So don't ever just charge by itself unless you're confident you're going to hit 5 different people, because charge only hits mobs once per charge. And sprint in general, you want to save your charge until that comes back. Obviously, if it's a life-threatening situation, charge with it, get away from a jailer, what have you, but generally speaking, you start the fight, if you have no fury at all, with Warcry. That's the basic of the charge setup, and you generally want to go ahead and start sprint first, have the mob walk into your tornado, and then sprint in when sprint is still active, or just reactivate it one more time and then sprint in. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to make sure that tornadoes are already hitting something before you start sprinting. It's going to give you maybe an extra hit or 2. If you're fighting 1 or 2 guys, it's going to give you more of a chance to do an instant cooldown than if you were to start it with sprint and charge together. So start it with sprint first, let them walk into it, and then go back into the actual mob itself. The second thing that's a rule of thumb with this is you want to go ahead and kite most times, and I'll say most, and as you practice you'll get used to what is a better method for yourself. You want to kite with sprint in a straight line, and the reason why that is because most mobs will tend to follow and group together. So if they're like in this portion of the map, this portion of the map, they will funnel in together if you're kiting upwards. So they'll kind of follow you, and then they'll walk into a tornado, and once again, once they're touching a tornado, it sets you up for a charge. So that's the other rule of thumb. You can, once you start seeing a line of people here, get a little bit cockier and sprint around there and then charge straight through. But once again, you want to do it at a comfort level where you're comfortable with the build already. You've gotten enough practice and you know that for sure you're going to get an instant cooldown. The worst thing you can do with this build is get stuck. It's not the end of the world, you just have to play smarter, but getting stuck sucks. The third thing that's a rule of thumb is when you're charging, do not charge into a pack. What I mean by that is exercise your mouse movements to be as far away from the target that you want to hit as possible. So if this is the mob that I'm doing, or I'm trying to go ahead and charge through, let's say my character, well, obviously is right behind this guy here. My charge destination, my mouse pointer wants to be up here. Now after I'm done, my charge is probably going to take me to about this area here. On my next charge, instead of going back this far, I want to put my mouse pointer here. So it's, you know, as far of a reach as you can. A lot of times I'm hitting things like globes and chat and you know, other things that I should not be hitting. Multiplayer, I'm hitting portraits a lot. But you generally want to stretch out your charges as far as possible. Reason for is because, once again, sprint is distance based, or run like the wind, I should say. So the more distance you travel, the more tornadoes you generate under yourself, and if you shorten up your distance, you get more charges in, but you might not get the full guarantee of a full cooldown. So those are some general rule of thumbs. Another rule of thumb I have is, I already explained in a prior video, but you want to go ahead and save leap. Leap is definitely a skill where I would say in this setup here it's more escape than it is offense. Some exceptions to that rule, and I'll explain that a little later as well. And that's the other rule of thumb, is just conserve this as much as possible. Although this is here for a tanky reason, this is not a tanky build in which you have to spam it to stay alive, because charge will get you enough heals along with sprint that you don't need the tank ability to stay alive. Use it to get out of things like frozen orb traps, arcanes if there's a lot of arcanes. Use it to get out of wallers, illusionists that are fast and they'll trap you. All of those are great, but illusionists with this build, honestly, charge is its best friend. If you meet a mob with illusionists, you're gonna be in heaven. Same thing with horde. So without further ado, let me show you some neat ways to start this too. There's a couple of combos you can do. So we explained the kiting one with the sprint. Let's show you another one. So right here, I'm in hell right now because once again my gear is overpowered for this level. I can't really die. So I've gone with Warcry there. I'm just gonna hit sprint and do this. Leap over and then charge back. You see that? Instantaneous. And the reason why that is, and I'm using my weapon, I shouldn't be. And the reason why that is because when you're leaping with sprint, something happened here is the generation of tornadoes underneath you. And while you're under the tornado hits like you are, you can already start generating hits, and you can run back in, and it's gonna give you multiple hits on tornadoes along with the charge. So even if 3-4 mobs are around, this is a move that I use to start a lot of my fights, and it's relatively safe in most aspects. And the reason why it's safe is because, first and foremost, you don't initiate the fight within damage, unless you're fighting, you know, range mobs like the impalers there. But what happens is when you're leaping over something, you're gonna get 300% armor on landing, so that's great. The second thing that it does for you is it already starts the tornadoes like I was explaining. And the third thing is when you're charging back and forth, even if you were to hit a wall, and even if you were to get bugged and stuck, because the tornadoes are already generated, your cooldown for charge, it's pretty much going to be either halfway or 3/4 of the way. You're probably going to wait maybe 1 or 2 seconds at the most to get it back. So you could charge back out if you feel that, you know, there's a chance for you to get stuck again. And overpower will also be a big play here too. So you have basically 4 seconds of pretty buff invulnerability, I would say, if you're geared correctly, that you're not going to die with leap already. And if you run into trouble, you're waiting for this to cool down and 4 seconds has already passed, you pop overpower for another 30% reduction in damage, because once again it doesn't just mitigate, it ignores. It basically is going to give you enough time, like 8 seconds, to regenerate charge. By then you should have it back already, and if you're standing in plague, you're healing with this. So I like opening with leap like that, although I told you to save it. I only do it on mobs that I know will not get me any trouble if I were to get stuck. There are exceptions though. You'll see in my videos if I fight demonic tremors, because I need the extra armor in that fight, you're gonna have to play smarter and use this to start the fight, but at the same time get out immediately after the 4 seconds is up, because overpower itself against demonic tremors sometimes not enough. Then you're just gonna have to kite around with sprint and basically go back to this setup here whenever you feel that, you know, you're getting hurt quite a bit. So that's number one technique, I don't have a name for most of these things, but you could come up with a name if you like. Leap in with sprint, charge back into it. So that's number one. Now the second thing that I would like to show you guys is for mobs like demonic tremors. If you watch my videos, I generally do this. When you're charging these mobs that have like these startup animations, and then it takes a while for them to hit you, things like swift skull cleavers, those guys that drag the big axe, they generally will never hit you if you're charging through them for the first time. One of the general rules of fighting those mobs is that because their animation doesn't hit you that quickly on startup, walk up as close as possible before you do the charge, and make sure your charge landing is as far away as possible. So if they completed their swing, they will not hit you because you're far enough away. So that's rule number one for fighting these mobs that have these big gigantic animations. Just try to start your charge as close to them as possible, as safe as possible, go through them and land as far as possible from their end swing. So that's another tip. But there's also one more way that you can ensure that happening. So let me show you here. So we're gonna reset them back a little bit further this way. Just kite them into the first tornado, hit them back. But what I'm gonna do, right, is I'm gonna go like this. I don't want to drag more people in, but generate one tornado distance after you charge, like this. Generate one tornado. When they go back into it, go back in. And the reason why you want to do this is because when you're fighting mobs like demonic tremors, they will have a wind up in their animation, like I was saying. And if you were to go immediately back in, they might not be finished with it, but because you're sending yourself back into that frame of animation, you will get hit by the aftermath. And that's very risky on your part. I'm just gonna get away from that whistling noise there. It works the same with Phase Beast. I know a couple of my videos I've shown some shielded Phase Beast, and that's, I would say, crucial for you to go ahead and do for them, because they once again hit really hard, and you do not want to get into a point where 3 of them can hit you at once. If you do the move that I just did there where you charge through, generate one tornado before you go back in, and make sure they're in that tornado before you charge in. You're not going to have an issue with taking the amount of damage from them, because 1 Phase Beast might not kill you. 3, you might get into a little bit hairy situation. So that's move number 2. Another move that I would like to show you too, it's another escape mechanism. So let's say you've gone in with Leap and you hit a waller, and your overpowers on cooldown, and you're panicking, you don't know what to do, and all you have is charge, and the best thing you know how to do is just charge back and forth to get healed. But if you're fighting things that'll kill you if you did that, this is what I do. So what you do is you charge through, and right there, as you can see, I still have full cooldown. I hit nothing, but you see the distance that I've generated and all the tornadoes that I have in my wake. You use an empty charge to get away from a situation if it requires it. So basically you could do this, and you can see I still have full cooldown, and the reason why that is because the tornadoes that I've generated in the previous charges were enough to generate the hits while I'm in animation to cool it down. So you don't have to use charge to hit anything and still get a full cooldown. So if you're fighting a mob and you see arcanes all over the place, well, drag the fight over here. If you see arcane, just generate it and it's about to pop. Basically you get that to space yourself out, distance yourself. Works with frozen globes as well. So if your Leap is out of commission, that's another escape mechanism that you can use, as the empty charge, and that will keep you safe relatively longer than if you were to just go back and forth, because you're still healing with the tornadoes. You're just not in the danger zone anymore. So keep that in mind. So those are 3 primary moves that I think a lot of people adapting this new build are not aware of, or they didn't know that they can do combos like that to make it work. And generally speaking, those are the big 3 that I use. There's other ones too, like in general, if you're fighting one-on-one, I'm just gonna go ahead and equip my weapon here, kill some of these things, and fight a one-on-one really quick just to show you some one-on-one tips, because that's the good portion of this build, the portion where you're charging everything non-stop. The other portion of this build is the tanky aspect, and this is a molten plague mob. This is gonna be beautiful. So I'm just gonna kill actually maybe a couple of these guys here. I don't want to kill the other guy. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna let him wail on me for a little bit. This thing's actually pretty cool. This guy here, when you're playing an Inferno, save these because you can proc overpower when they're doing this little, flame thing, and it gives you a full heal, and also fills up your Fury Bank. And I got no weapon. I'm trying to beat it down, so let's just get away from that. So when you see those around, those are like refuel stations. They give you heals and everything like that. So when you're fighting one-on-one, you can always, of course, fight them the tanky style with Fury. You could leap and basically get the 300% armor, but you notice when I leap, now most tanky players when they leap, they're going to leap in place. And the problem with leaping in place in this is you gain no advantage from that. In this build, what I would like you to do is when you're fighting one-on-one, leap over them. And right now, even if I'm not hitting them, you notice that there's going to be some sort of damage going on. That's because leap, once again, is going to generate a tornado under yourself. And if you play around with leap enough, and I'm going to kill the demonic tremor right now because that guy does not need to be in this fight. When you play with leap enough, you come to notice what kind of patterns you get with sprint. And I'm just going to show you a full leap here. You're going to see one tornado, two tornadoes. When you play with sprint and leap enough, you're going to be able to gauge where that second tornado is. So let's say I'm going to run away really quick and I want to hit this guy with a tornado. It's going to generate right behind where you land if you know your distance. And generally it's not a hard distance to hit. If you over jump it, it will land a little bit farther back. So if you gauge it well enough, you could always land it to hit this guy. And then by charge, you see that a quarter of my cooldown has immediately cooled down after that one charge. And incorporate that leap into your single mob one-on-one fight. And as you can see, if you don't generate enough distance from the leap, you can just walk a step over and that will generate it for you. So I'm gonna go do a short leap here. Did not generate a tornado, but just move out and the tornado is generated. So use that as a guide, as a tip for one-on-one fighting. The second thing you want to do, of course, you could do the same thing with charge. Just because it's a single mob, don't neglect charge. Charge will generate that tornado for you for healing. There's times when they just hit too hard, and this is the exception to the rule as I was saying. Charge through with a tornado, wrap around them for 2-3 tornadoes, and you will get yourself quite a bit of life on hit during that time. You could also do it with leap, and when you do it right with leap, I got half of my cooldown immediately because I got multiple tornadoes around this guy. There are times when the mob is big enough and you stand in the right position that you can get enough tornado hits on them to basically go ahead and instant cooldown your charge, even on a single mob. They have to maybe be Avenger, just everything has to be right. So now that my life is down a little bit, I'm just going to show you the combo right now with Overpower. So in the middle of a fight, you hit Overpower, look at that. Instantaneously heals, and you see those numbers that are proccing. That's the advantage of having Overpower plus life on hit. Now if you up your items once again to have more crit chance on it, this combo is unstoppable. You can charge in this forever and you will not have to worry about heals at all because that's instantaneous how quickly that procs it. You can see I'm healing 1,000 per 5 seconds, or half a second I mean. And generally speaking, even standing around, I have a generation of 117, but nothing in the game compares to this 2,000. As you see there, that's almost 4,400 heals per second. So that combination is huge. Not only does that work on AoE, that works on enrage mobs. And there'll be times where you just might meet that one mob your DPS doesn't carry you. Well, that kills them basically from their own enrage. So that helps quite a ton. And the more intense they're enraged, the more it hurts. But you just have to make sure that you can proc this quickly enough that you could sustain that enrage timer. The other things that I would have to show for one-on-one fights, it's basically, I mean, that's it for one-on-one. That's pretty much basic tank style. Yeah, I'd just like to add to the end here, other tips is some people might have trouble with fire chains. I would just recommend that you have proc Overpower before charging into a fire chains mob. Reason for it is because sometimes they spread out and they have hard AI to make them spread out. They usually don't cluster like a lot of melee mobs, even though they're melee based. And if you're fighting kiters, it's going to be a pain. always proc overpower before charging it. It's just going to save you a lot of headaches. You're not going to get a flash kill from being damaged way too hard on the end cycle of charge. And generally speaking, they have a hard set pattern too, so if you're fighting them and you know that they're going for that surround that they do, sprint with them. Keep the mobs in front of you, keep everybody in front of you. That's a general sense of fighting them with sprint in your skill bar. It has nothing to do with this build. However, if you don't notice it, watch for when they stop hitting you and they're going for a movement of some sort. It doesn't make any sense. If you're right next to each other, they should fight each other. But once they stop swinging, they're going to try to surround you with that chain. And if you notice it, hit sprint, run the same way that they're going, keep them in front of you, and if they're running faster than you, run the other way back. Just make sure you don't get caught in that chain. The other thing that I would say too is in this build, a lot of people don't know, but charge itself breaks jailer effects. So whenever you meet jailer with this build, it's very much a non-issue. Because you're constantly charging, you see maybe your follower and everybody else get jailed but you, because even when you're inside of jailer, sprint, or not sprint, I keep saying sprint, charge is one of those moves that are still active. You can still use it to get out of that frame. It's kind of like smoke screen for demon hunters and things of the like. However, with this, obviously, because you get constant cooldown, you won't notice it. The other thing that is good for it, charge itself has a built-in immunity to it, so there's only a few frames within the charge itself that allows itself to get frozen, nightmared, you know, things that have control to them. So like vortex mobs can't suck you in during the animation, but there's a few frames if you're chaining that it's right after a charge and right before the second one initiates. There's a group of frames in there. It's very short, it's less than half a second. It's a small window in which you can get CC'd. With enough practice, you will get to gauge it. The one mob that you will want to pay attention to at that point is frozen mobs, because frozen mobs, you know, frozen itself isn't a great deal of pain, but if they coupled it with, like, say, arcane, or if they're demonic tremors and they can hit a ton, then frozen can be a problem. Whenever I play this build or any other build in general, I always ask myself the question, you know, will I be able to last or withstand the damage incoming if I were to get frozen after this next action? In this build, for instance, it's going to be my next charge. If the answer is no, I can't get frozen and survive, save leap to a safe area, reset the fight. And the beauty of this is you don't have cooldown like Wrath of the Berserker. You don't have cooldown like Earthquake with a two-hand build. You can simply leap out, get all your cooldowns back, and start the fight fresh. And that's going to give you a good chance of survival. The other thing with it is if you say, well, I could survive this, you could risk going with charge and having them basically, you know, immune the frames for you and take that risk and continue the DPS because you have them in good position, whatnot. If you know that you're fighting a bunch of hellhounds, you know, in the beginning of Act 3, those guys do atrocious damage to a barb, tank them, you know, get frozen, doesn't matter, get jailered. But only if you're for sure that you're going to survive. Most times I don't risk it, I jump out, I just don't like dying, so that's my style. That's my tip for you guys for fighting frozen. Same with arcane. If you see a lot of arcanes, especially if you're meeting things in the depth, try not to fight them in doorways. Try to fight them as much as possible in larger rooms so you have room to maneuver. I know a lot of players don't use terrain to their advantage, but with any build in general, I mean, you know, you're not going to survive if you're charging back and forth through arcane. Although with this build, you can charge through arcane in a quick instance, just do not line yourself up into the long portion of arcane. So if you're running perpendicular with it, great, just don't run parallel and then walking on top of it, because you will take a lot of damage. But charging through an arcane beam, absolutely fine, you're going to actually get very little to none damage. So that's another tip for arcane mobs. And basically those are the mobs that, like we covered earlier, going to give you the most trouble, going to be the most painful. And I think that's all the tips that I have for this portion of it. I know I'm probably going to be missing some. I'll probably add it with text in the thread that's going to be, you know, it's going to be encompassing this video tutorial here. in case I do miss anything. And of course, check the description for every useful link as well. There's going to be many different links, and check my YouTube channel for example fights. After hearing a lot of these tips, you'll probably see me using these techniques on some fights that you haven't recognized before. So definitely do take a look at those. If you have any questions, by any means possible, you know, hit me up on Reddit, hit me up in game. I'm in the North American servers, and basically we'll go from there. This tutorial basically took me maybe about 4 hours to make, so if you have any questions at all, leave comments here, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as possible. I can't do too many of these commentaries because the house is rather noisy most times, and that's why right now you see it's 7:30 a.m. Started about 3:30 a.m. and that's the way that I generally do these when I have time. So I'll see you guys next time, and I'll be waiting for 1.0.4 because then the gearing might change a little bit. Looking forward to Firewalkers. If you guys haven't read the blog yet, read it, because those Firewalkers are going to leave a trail of molten behind you like molten mobs will. And with this build, I think that you're going to probably progress quite a bit further, you know, with that added damage, and it's going to be exciting. So we'll see then. Alright, take care. Bye bye.